Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's September, which I'm sure you already knew, but it's an exciting change of season for us at Plant Powered Metro New York because all the fall fruits and vegetables are coming into season. Welcome. My name is Wendy Sachs, and I am on the board of Plant Powered Metro New York. And welcome to our ongoing monthly series, Cooking with Chef Carole, which is presented by ppmny.org. Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant-based approach to nutrition. Together with a wide network of grassroots leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of whole food, plant-based eating. We offer education. We build supportive communities in person and online, which empower people to make lifestyle adjustments. And we also organize and lead projects that spark changes to food policy, food practice, and culture. Quick announcements. Again, welcome to everybody, including those people watching the replay. A very special welcome this Sunday to those of you who are participating in the Jumpstart. Huge congratulations for signing up and being here. And just want to say personally, it's awesome. You've taken the first steps toward improving and creating optimal health. And I wish you all kinds of continued success along this journey. I do want to say I used to be a mentor, and I want to say sort of, gather that part of you that's like compliant and conscientious and just go on this ride with us. You don't have to stick to it afterwards, but the more you do it, the within this period of time with all the support, the more success you will probably have. So try to be your most conscientious and most compliant with all the guidelines you'll be given. So September at the farmer's market, we're in the final weeks of delicious peaches. Eggplants, tomatoes, garlic are all in season, and we're starting to see the apple crates from the local farms, at least here in New York, kale and squashes and pumpkins, all starting to appear. So avail yourself of this diversity of autumn. And of course, we continue to encourage you to buy organic, fresh ingredients. And I know last month, Carole spoke a lot about the advantages of participating in your community-supported agriculture, but the CSAs are really full of delicious stuff this month too. So for the jump starters, today's program, titled by Carole, is Foods I Couldn't Live Without When I Transitioned to a plant-based diet. And I like calling today's session Back to Basics, which is no matter how long we've been doing this, or one has been doing it, it's good to go back to the basics. And a little secret, many of us have used Carole's techniques and menu to do what you are all doing right now, which is making that transition. So I think you're up for a really yummy ride ahead. Another quick announcement, I'll do these at the end too. Tomorrow night, we have an event called A Taste of Health in the Plant Powered Garden through Plant Powered Metro New York. The information's on our site. September 21st, our book club, and September 28th, our Heart to Healthy Heart series. Again, I'll mention this at the end, but just letting you know, and a special call out to one of our partners, Ron Weiss of Ethos Farm, who's having an event called Farm Days next weekend at his farm in New Jersey. Okay, more on that later. So guidelines, please let us know where you're from in the chat. Please ask questions in the chat. Carole and I usually allow time during the demo, but if not, we save a few minutes at the end to answer your questions. If you're enjoying the presentation, please like us on Facebook or YouTube. And to those listening to the replays, thank you for being here and enjoy. Okay, Carole, what's on the menu today? I was going to talk about tomatoes, but I want to give you the floor. We had a lot of announcements.
Oh gosh, tomatoes. We could start with tomatoes because There are a million of them in my yard. and I'm getting ready to start canning the tomatoes to make sauce to get me through the winter. But it's still, like you said, Wendy, it's the end of the season for summer and the start of fall. So it's kind of an exciting time where you don't want to let go of those stone fruit things, the beautiful peaches, but it's getting to be the time for pears. So we are making really basic things today. And for those of you who have been coming to my demos for the last 2.5, 3 years, I hope this is just a refresher course for you, because it's really geared towards the people that are here for the Jumpstart program, for the 21-day program, something that I myself participated in almost 3 years ago when Plant Powered Metro New York had one of their very first Jumpstart programs, because it takes about 21 days to change your eating habits and your taste buds, right? And I was a person that loved olive oil, a person that loved salt, and I was a vegetarian, eating occasionally fish, which would be technically a pescatarian, but I transitioned from eating cheeses and eggs and dairy and salt and sugar to this vegan SOS free diet a number of years ago. Wendy was a very close friend of mine. She talked about it all the time, and I couldn't even imagine how could one cook without oil. I knew a little bit how to do that, but I really had to reinvent things for myself. And the things that we're making today are just very basic things, because I needed to have basic things in place. Otherwise, I felt I couldn't do this diet. And it's really not so much a diet, but a lifestyle. And when I was shifting, I thought, if I'm not gonna, once you get rid of all the toxic things in your refrigerator, your cabinet. I was never a person that had a lot of processed foods in my house, but I had to get rid of the olive oil and the different kinds of sugars that I had and the salt. And that was a really big deal for me. And I didn't want to leave recipes that I loved so very much. So today what we're going to do is we're going to make a couple things. We're going to make overnight oats, which maybe many of you know about and maybe none of you know anything about them. But why is overnight oats so good and compared to just eating hot oatmeal? One, in the summer, I've never wanted hot oatmeal. And two, I can make a bunch of overnight oats, put it in the refrigerator, and it's kind of ready to go with me wherever I go, whether it's a breakfast or a snack. And then we're going to make a wonderful cornbread, because I love cornbread and I'm a baker. That's my background as a baker. And I thought, what if I can't bake? What am I going to do? Well, it's not true. If you have certain things on hand, you still can bake. So we're going to make a nice cornbread, which is fast, and we're going to get it into the oven after we mix it up quickly. And then we're going to make a dressing. And a dressing was a really important thing for me, because when you're eating salads, and if you're reaching for your cabinet and you're just pulling out the olive oil and the lemon juice to pour on, but you're not using that olive oil anymore, I felt it was really important that I always have a dressing in the refrigerator, some kind of dressing, whether it was a balsamic dressing, a Caesar dressing, a carrot dressing, a raspberry dressing. So in the recipes, we're just making one dressing, but I've given you a couple bonus recipes just to have, so that you can see the variety of dressings that you can make without any oil. Because I think having that dressing, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I can't eat a salad unless I have that dressing. But you can always put a squeeze of lemon juice, or often I just pour a little bit of balsamic vinegar or some kind of flavored vinegar, and then I'm done, and I don't even use a dressing. So we're going to do a dressing, and then I think it's important to have some kind of sauce in your refrigerator. And today's sauce is just going to be a very simple marinara, and one that doesn't really need a recipe, because in our last demo, when we were focused on the CSA box, I actually went over and said, a recipe is really good. It's a guide, but sometimes you want to just make something and throw it together. So we're going to put together a marinara sauce that is going to have a few basic things, and we're just going to put it together, and then we can serve it on pasta, and we can add greens or beans with the marinara, because we always need to eat our greens and our beans. So I'm going to get started. And again, maybe many of you understand about overnight oats. I usually start with a jar like this, a ball jar. Although I collect a lot of jars, and I'm going to get the ones I have in the refrigerator actually out. Because this is my jar that I have a bunch of these jars that are just old tahini jars, believe it or not, that I love just making the overnight oats. But I think I'm just so you maybe most, having a ball jar, a small one, is perfect for this. So in the recipe, I say that you need 3/4 cup of oats. It really is up to you how many oats. I honestly never measure it. I just pour it in. Okay, so I'm literally just going to do that, but I'm going to say about 3/4 of a cup. Okay, then what we're going to do is, most people like cinnamon or they like nutmeg on their oatmeal, and sometimes they like oats. Besides oats, I mean raisins, and sometimes they like walnuts. That's kind of a typical oatmeal, warm oatmeal. But I have discovered that cardamom, which is a wonderful, wonderful spice, and if you've never had cardamom, I suggest you go and actually get cardamom, because it really is a game changer for my oats. I don't know, I decided just to try it one day, and I was like so wowed by it that now I have to have cardamom, and I never think about the cinnamon or the nutmeg. So I put a 1/4 teaspoon. That's the proportion that I always put. No matter how many oats, I just put a 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. And then you can start and you can layer the fruit if you want to put fruit in. Now it's a good time, but I actually like dressing it up at the when I'm going to go and eat it. So I wait on the fruit and the nuts until until just before I'm eating it. So far we have our oats and our cardamom, and then we need our chia seeds. And I always put a tablespoon of chia seeds. And chia seeds are tiny little dots. I don't know if you can actually see them here. I already poured them in. But chia seed is common in making pudding, because what these little dots do is they expand when they become wet. And they are really full of omega-3 fatty acids, and they're really good for fiber. So they're almost as good as having flaxseed, which I always recommend having 2 tablespoons a day of flaxseed into your diet. But today we're doing the chia seed. We're going to use flaxseed in our cornbread, so you'll become familiar with that. Now, some of these things you might not even know what they are. When I transitioned, I actually had to go buy certain things because I never had nutritional yeast in my cabinet, or I didn't have a lot of chia seeds in my cabinet, or hemp. Those were things that I actually had to go get. So you make a list and you start small. Don't feel ever overwhelmed that you need to have 60 spices. I always say you start small and get a handful of things, and over time you end up adding things to your pantry. But don't feel like you have to have all these things so that you can start. The biggest thing to have is 1, organization, and 2, you really do need to get the junk out of your house. Because if the junk is in your house, you're going to absolutely eat it. So I would start with a clean pantry and slowly build that pantry with a handful of spices. And then before you know it, you'll have 10 spices. And then you'll have 15 spices. And then you'll have 60 spices like Wendy. So why do I know that Wendy has 60 spices? Because I organized her spice cabinet with her and we labeled everything. And I remember us sitting down with 60 spices.
Thank
So
you,
the next
Carole.
thing that goes in here, yes, Wendy?
I just said thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Because having a nice spice cabinet is really important.
Worth
And don't
everything.
keep those spices. I always remind people. People think they should be over the stove because it looks so pretty and decorative. But actually, you keep the spices away from the stove. Hopefully, in a dark cabinet and away from the heat, because actually dried spices can last 2 or 3 years. I don't think any of mine, maybe a few of them last 2 or 3 years. But if you keep them away from the heat, they will last longer. So what goes into this next is some plant-based milk. Now, it is up to you what kind of milk you use. There is almond milk, there's oat milk, there's soy milk, there's cashew milk. And I suggest that if you're new to all this, that you try them all, because they're not all the same. Not every brand is the same. A lot of the brands read the label, look at what's on the back of the label, and ultimately, if you're buying almond milk, you want almonds and water. That is ultimately what you want. You don't want a paragraph of lots of things in that almond milk. But sometimes that's what you have available and you have to buy it. But just be conscious and try to get unsweetened, because they do sometimes add sugar or extra flavorings to the milk. So this right here is just some almond milk here. I have 2 kinds of milk in my refrigerator. I really like soy milk in my tea, but I like almond milk in a lot of the baking things. So I'm just gonna pour. It's about a half a cup, I would say, a half a cup. I don't use too much milk because I want to save the milk sometimes for other things like smoothies. And then I usually put a little bit of water, okay? It's not going to dilute it. So this is what this looks like. And then I give it a good shake, okay? I give it a good shake so that no chia seeds are sitting at the bottom. And this goes in the refrigerator. And I usually make a couple jars at a time. So this is what's been in the refrigerator. This is what's been in the refrigerator here. Oh, I have a barking dog at the moment, so excuse me. This is what's been in the refrigerator. Do I even bother to take it out of the jar when I eat it? I don't. I love it in the jar. I take it every day to work with me. Sometimes if I'm on a road trip, I actually just take this as a snack. And then we can start layering anything we want on it. So here I actually have, I'm going to put a very few pistachios, because that's a little bit of a treat and it's quite delicious. And you want to only eat 1 to 2 ounces of nuts a day, especially if you're watching your weight and your calories. I have some raspberries here, which I think will be delicious. And again, we could have layered all these things. And then I have a local peach. And I'm looking at it and I'm realizing I haven't washed it. And I do all of this part in the morning before I go to work. And you just turn it, right? You know, you can just turn it and and then I cut this, right? I just cut this and I put it on the top, and that becomes the fruit. And you could put dried raisins or dried cranberries, dried anything you want. And then this is kind of, I usually try to cram in the whole peach, believe it or not. And I usually taste the peach. Okay, some peaches aren't good. But this particular one I knew would be good because I've been eating a bunch of them. They're local peaches. And then I put the lid on this and it's ready to go. Okay, the longer that this sits, the creamier it gets. You don't ever have to put it on the stove. You don't need to cook the oats. It's cold oats and it's really creamy. And I do hear that sometimes people don't like oats, but I really suggest that you just try them. If you don't like oats, then there are lots of other kinds of cold cereal that you can eat in the morning. There is buckwheat that you can eat. You can eat millet. You can eat quinoa. Quinoa is another thing that I always have in my fridge, and I love putting a big chunk, a big tablespoon into my oats. So the two little tips that I've given you here today are try a little bit of cardamom if you normally eat overnight oats, and definitely try to put some quinoa into your oats because it's full of protein and it's so delicious because it's nutty tasting and it really pairs well with the oatmeal. So this now just goes back into the refrigerator, and this can sit literally 3, 4, maybe even 5 days. And the longer it sits, the creamier it gets. And every time I go into it in the morning, I'm like, oh my God, this is so delicious. I can't believe it. And I always want to like share it with somebody, like, here's a spoonful, like, because it's so very yummy. But that's it. And you could use an apple. Obviously, you can dice up an apple and put that in when you're putting your oats. You could use a pear. And it's endless how many things you can put in. I'm just going to put this in the fridge so it stays cold. Wendy, are there any questions about overnight oats?
At the moment, no. There's one person who wants to substitute flax for chia. I've just answered yes, it's entirely fine. And just so you know, I was just writing this. Most doctors recommend 2 tablespoons flax a day, but you can substitute, tablespoon flax, tablespoon hemp. You can kind of mix up flax or hemp or chia. They all have high omega-3s. And again,
yes, and I know, and I've studied the hemp is the highest in protein.
Yes.
Of all of them, which is kind of pretty interesting. I often make the hemp milk like you, Wendy, with the almonds and the hemp, when you add hemp to the almond milk. So we're not going over how to make the milks today, because I think some people will do that, but I just encourage, and the brand of almond milk that I really like is called 3 Trees. Literally 3 trees.
Right.
It is the purest kind. It is a little bit expensive. So the next kind that I think is probably acceptable or doable is the Califia. And that comes in coconut and combination of almond and coconut. They do put some stabilizers in there because they want it to last on the shelf. Because when you just have almonds and water, it's hard to keep it just on the shelf. That's why they put all those extra ingredients in.
Two other questions, Carole, quickly. I know you're eager to move on, but one is, can you make oat granola if you hate oatmeal? And then I'll ask you the second question.
Well, of course, I mean, if you hate oatmeal, I'm not sure why you're eating granola. I mean, granola is oatmeal. It is oats. That's usually what granola is, only it's toasted, and it's usually coated with sugar, coated with honey, and I would say if you're making your own granola and you know exactly what's in it, but of course you could easily soak that granola and do the exact same thing with granola. But don't tell me you hate oats, because it's all oats usually.
Well, I think that maybe the difference between like a porridge and something crunchy, maybe with a granola.
Oh, and I talk about crunchy all the time, Wendy, and you're going to see throughout this that I'm always talking about crunchy. That's why the apple's really good in there. That's why a very few nuts are really good in there. That's why when you make a salad, and you're going to see we make a salad today, the crunch is really appealing. I don't know what to do without crunch, because it is something that is so satisfying that you have to have crunch.
And I'll just go ahead. I agree with you, Carole, because I see your comment, love oats except oatmeal. One thing, totally get it, but one thing that oatmeal has that granola doesn't is water. So for many of you on the Jumpstart, fiber and water is the best thing for our guts, and that's what you're getting through all these fruits and vegetables. You're looking for foods that have fiber and water. If you're roasting your oatmeal, that's fine. You may still have the fresh fruits that will have fiber and water. And you can also use other grains like millet or amaranth or quinoa, as Carole mentioned, or you can roast your oats for the granola.
And we talk a lot about fiber, and I almost want to say, don't get me started.
I understand.
Because it's something I talk about all the time, and very quickly, our sad American diet, our real standard American diet, we eat, each person approximately it's 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, and we need at least 40 grams a day, at least 40. So most people are very, very far away from their fiber content. So if you start with chia seeds that have fiber, oats that have fiber, you know, you're on your way to a good day. You're starting to build that number. We're going to actually put even beans in our marinara sauce later. You don't have to, but it's something that you, again, adding the fiber. So let's move on to the next thing.
Sorry, Carol, one more quick question, which is just yes or no. Does the quinoa have to be cooked?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, and I always have cooked quinoa. Like that's something that on a Sunday, just like I've made a thing of beans today, I spend a few hours. I'm never going to lie to you and say, you can do all this eating and not spend time in the kitchen. You're not going to spend, I don't spend every single day in the kitchen. I prepare a bunch of food on Sunday that gets me through almost the entire week. I probably start to run out of food on Thursdays, but I have my overnight oatmeal made. I have a bunch of potatoes cooked, whether they're sweet potatoes or white potatoes. I usually have one entree cooked, whether they're burgers or whether it's a stew. And then I usually have some kind of dressing so that when I want to put together the fast salad, it's like 1, 2, 3. No waste of time. So let's move on, okay?
Yep.
When I transitioned, and as I mentioned to you, baking was a really important thing. I grew up on cornbread. I don't know, my mother must have fed me so much cornbread as a child. At that time, I'll tell you, it was those little Jiffy boxes. And what does cornbread have in it? It normally has some kind of all-purpose flour and then some cornmeal, right? And then it always has some kind of fat. That can be butter, that can be oil, that can be corn oil, that could be olive oil, and then it has a sweetener because people put a lot of sugar in cornbread. So one of the things when I was transitioning was I thought, how am I going to live without cornbread? I like it as a side, I like it as breakfast, I like it all the time. But so I wanted to show you a quick baking thing here today to show you that things are possible, but you again have to have certain staples and you have to be able to know what to substitute. So the very first thing that we're going to do, and I kind of have this recipe memorized because I make it so often, and I use regular yellow cornmeal, which you can buy in the store. Since living in New Mexico, I've been in love with this purple corn that we get here, that I've been making a lot of blue cornbread because it's just so beautiful and just tastes really good. Today we're going to actually use a cornmeal that comes right from Union Square Market in New York. A friend who came to visit me last year said, I know you love this cornmeal and this is my gift to you. And I was just like, oh my God. So I've been coveting it in my refrigerator almost a whole year, not wanting to use it, but I decided today that we would open it up. So what we need is, and usually cornmeal has some kind of egg in it. So what we're starting with in the bowl here is flax seed. And normally a normal egg made of flax seed is 1 tablespoon of flax seed to 3 tablespoons of water. And you put those two things together, you let it sit on your counter for like 5 minutes, and it begins to gel. But today we're not doing a full egg. This is 1.5 tablespoons of flaxseed. And Wendy early mentioned it, that we're supposed to have 2 tablespoons of it a day because of the omega-3s that are in it, but we have the 1.5 tablespoon, and then our recipe calls for how much milk does it call for? 1 cup of milk. Okay, so usually I used to use buttermilk in my cornbread because it had so much flavor. So this recipe says 1 tablespoon of lemon juice is optional. So if you know anything about buttermilk, it's sour milk. And you can still make sour milk with either putting vinegar or lemon juice. And you just literally put that juice into your milk here. And it actually, as it sits, you can already see it. It's starting to thicken and it almost starts to curdle. So I'm going to pour this milk now in with the flaxseed. And that's just going to sit. That is the beginning of my liquid ingredients. Now, the next thing that we need is either some kind of fat, and we also need to have some kind of sweetener. Now, we're going to use a half a cup of date paste. And in the recipes I gave for this demo, there is a recipe for date paste. I just happen, we're not going to have time to make it. I'm just going to tell you that it's a staple that I always have to have. So I just portioned out a half a cup here. It's just medjool dates. You can also use Deglet Noor dates, which are a little bit less expensive. And there is the recipe that I gave you, which is actually 8 ounces of 1 pound of medjool dates and then 1 cup of water. But I don't really follow a recipe for it anymore. But as soon as I knew this morning that I was going to make the date, use the last of my date paste, I immediately got some dates soaking. This is just in water. I covered the dates, I pitted them, and this is ready to go into a food processor or a blender, and you literally just puree it until it's very smooth. And then I store it in a small jar. I always date everything, so I know, and it can last a couple weeks. If you're someone that's not going to use any kind of date paste on a regular basis, make some and freeze some and then put some in a little jar. But I have this soaking, and sometimes I don't use all the water in this, and this water would be delicious if you're someone that really likes your oatmeal a little bit sweet. We didn't talk about sweetening the overnight oats. You could do it with maple syrup. You could put a date in it and let it, as it soaks and expands, it will, the sweetness of the date will go right into your oatmeal. I try to just eat the fruit, which has enough sugar in it. Because for me, I love sugar so much that the minute I start to open the door and add other sweeteners into it, like a date paste, then it's just going to make me crave more sugar in the morning. And I try not to do that. So often when I'm eating regular oatmeal, I'll put some vegetables on top of it because, again, I don't really sometimes want to open the sweetness door so early in the morning because it's something I really like. So that's the date paste. So let's get this in here and not waste any time. And I'm just going to put a half a cup. Sometimes I even use a third of a cup. It really depends on how much I have, but you don't need any more than a half a cup. Okay, so this gets blended, and then as a substitute for some kind of fat or oil, we're actually going to use an applesauce. Now, I usually make a lot of my own applesauce, and I have quite a bit in the refrigerator. But what I like about these little ones is because I bake so much, this is actually 4 ounces, which is a half a cup. So I like this rather than buying a big jar of applesauce and possibly letting it spoil. I just end up using these little cups, and it actually works really good. And I don't even have to measure it because I know that it's 4 ounces and that it's a half a cup. So that is our liquid here, okay? And then the next thing that we need is we need to have our cornmeal. And in the past, I used to use white flour, but white flour has no nutrients, right? The reason they call it enriched all-purpose flour is because they take all the nutrients out of the wheat, and then the FDA makes them put in the nutrients back in. That's why it's called enriched flour. So here I'm suggesting that you either use spelt or you can use oat flour. That is up to you. I'm using a spelt flour today. For those of you that are gluten-free, you could use gluten-free oat flour, if that's something that you can eat. I do know some people can't eat any, if they're gluten-free, any kind of oats, but there is gluten-free oats. And then we have a 1 cup of, so 1 cup of spelt and 1 cup of cornmeal. And then, of course, we need our rising agents. We need baking soda and baking powder, and that is going in here. Now, I'm talking so much, I'm just going to read through to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. We have cornmeal and spelt and baking soda, baking powder, our applesauce, our date paste, our milk, our flaxseed, and we added our 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. So you can see that if you have all those things in your pantry, that this is a really, I do this sometimes in the morning, literally while the water is boiling for the tea. I am actually making cornbread, and then I hop in the shower while it's cooking, and then it's out. So you can make muffins from this if you like, but we're going to make just a 8 by 8 square pan. And that is all mixed. You see, it's just like that. I'm not going to over mix it. I don't need to taste it. I have not added any salt. For those of you transitioning, if you felt the need, you could use a pinch of salt, but I have omitted it entirely. And as I said, you could make little muffins if you so desire, but we're just going to pour this batter in. Now, up until recently, when I was whole food plant-based and I was using oil, I would use regular pans, like a pan like this, a metal pan, a ceramic pan. But I have learned that the silicone pans, these silicone pans are awesome to have because they don't need oiling and you can just pour the batter right in. And this is a wonderful one. You often see silicone pans that are flimsy, but this one actually has a wire frame at the top, which actually makes it so it's very sturdy and not kind of going all over the place, juggling around. But I wanted to show you that if you don't have a silicone pan, that you certainly could use your old regular tin pan. And what I did was I just cut 2 pieces of parchment paper, and I cut them so that they were the width. And I put one in one direction and then one in the other. And then what you would do is you would just pour your batter in here. No oil, no butter, no greasing. And basically when it's done, you'll be able to pull it out by the paper and just cut it up from there. But I'm going to use the silicone pan because I have it. And I just wanted to show you that if you don't have a silicone pan, there are still many silicone pans that I don't have. I have a muffin tin, and I don't have a loaf pan. But when I don't have the right pan, I just line it with parchment paper, and it's perfect. And everything always comes out. And like I said, it's really great because with the parchment, because it allows you to lift things up. So this is just going to go in here. Sometimes I put frozen corn in here, just mix it in because it's quite delicious. Or since I've been living in New Mexico now, we have these hatch chilies, which are super great in this cornbread. So you can add things. If you're someone that actually likes a cheesy flavor, you want cheese and corn and chilies, you can actually add a little nutritional yeast, and you could have really yummy, cheesy corn, chili, cornbread. But today we're just making this as simple as possible. The oven is already preheated and it needs to cook for about 20 minutes. So let's get this in the oven right now. And so we can move on to our next thing. Wendy, are there any questions about the cornbread?
Let's see. It's not exactly about the cornbread, but I mentioned that the applesauce you're using, well, sorry, it is about the cornbread. The applesauce you're using is unsweetened in the package.
Yes,
so
yes.
You got a comment saying I use unsweetened applesauce too, that she wants to try your recipe, but without the sweetener of the date paste. Do you absolutely need the sweetener of the date paste to make that recipe work?
You don't, I haven't ever had cornbread that doesn't have sweetener. I'll be honest with you. Cornbread always has some kind of sugar. In the past, for me, it was white sugar or brown sugar. Sometimes it was honey. I don't eat honey. You could try make a little bit of just a little bit of maple syrup. But if you don't want any sweetener at all, do I think it could work? Probably. And you just have to try it, because once baking is a science, okay? I tell people that all the time. It is very scientific. So once you start messing with things, it becomes experimental. And if you are somebody that is willing to try something and see how it works, then go for it, because it could be delicious and perfect. It's just that I've never had any cornbread without some kind of sweetener. And as I mentioned, I often just use, when I first made this recipe, I did a half a cup. Often I just use a third of a cup, sometimes even a quarter cup, because you don't want it too sweet, but you want it to have a little bit sweet.
Other questions? Also, Carole, just so you know, we're getting a lot of stopping and starting and freezing. Just for the audience, I'm letting you know, sometimes it has to do with the weather. Of course, it's a beautiful day here, but we are broadcasting between New York and Taos, New Mexico. So sometimes there's a smidgen of a delay. Also, Carole, what oven temperature do you use, and can one buy date paste in the supermarket in a jar?
I think that I forget the brand. You can buy date syrup. You can definitely buy date syrup, and that would work. I would probably use less than a half a cup. I forget the brand. It's got a funny like lady on it. I don't remember what it's, but that is one thing that you can buy. I get my dates from a place called Indio in California, and it's from Shields Dates, and they make something that's super wonderful that I almost never talk about, and I don't want to reach into my cabinet to find it for you, but they're called date granules. And date granules, they sell them in a little 2-pound bag at Shields Dates, and they are basically the dates, the whole dates, and they put them in the sun and they dry them out, and then they just grind them up. And you can actually just add water to those granules and get date paste without even using a processor to make it smooth. You just literally add water to date granules. So I have never seen date granules in the store, in any store. There's date sugar. That looks very fine, and you could substitute that if that's something that you'd like to do.
And oven temperature, Carole?
Oh, it's in the recipe, but it's 375.
Great. So
okay, and we're gonna, yeah, and that was an 8x8 pan, and you can make muffins if you'd like. I have a silicone muffin pan that I often make bite-sized muffins, but I like making it in the 8x8 pan because I get 12 good pieces. They're just small pieces. If it was up to me, I would eat the whole bread at one time, half of the loaf. I sometimes have to just portion it out for myself and then put it away, because I don't know, maybe I'm addicted to cornbread. It is something I grew up with. My mother used to toast it in a toaster for me when I was a child and put a big pat of butter. So I don't know why, but it is something that I love. And when I was transitioning and worried and concerned about how am I going to bake if I'm not using oil and sugar and salt, and what am I going to do? I just, last semester here at the UNM, I taught a whole healthy baking class. It is super possible. I want to warn people, there are a million vegan desserts out there, a million, whether you're looking on the internet or you're just roaming around New York City and there's a vegan dessert. But I can promise you that there is a lot of oil and a lot of sugar in those desserts. So just keep that in mind, that you can be a vegan and you can be a junk food vegan. So you want to eat as cleanly and from the whole food as possible. That's why we start out with the dates and we make a paste.
Great. You
Are we
froze.
ready to move on?
We are. You froze for just a tiny bit, so we're ready. And yes, thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know why we're freezing. We don't have, sometimes they freeze, literally freeze because it's cold, but the kind of freezing you're talking about, I'm not sure why, because I don't see any freezing on my end, and the weather's perfect here today. Sometimes we have like, storms and lots of severe wind because we're out here in the desert, but today it's quiet, so I'm not sure what's going on, but it's okay. We'll just move on. And we're going to make not my dressing, not my invention, but one that I love so much that I really always want to show it off. And this is from Kathy Fisher, who wrote an amazing book that I almost couldn't live without when I transitioned, actually. Wendy shared it with me, and it's something that I really love. She really gives you a roadmap in the book to how to do this. She goes step by step by step. The recipes are fairly simple. And why did I find this particular recipe so attractive? Because I used to eat Caesar salad. And as you remember, if you've eaten Caesar salad, it has the anchovies, which I never really liked, but it has a lot of Parmesan cheese in it, and it has a lot of oil in it, and a raw egg. Okay, all the things that we're trying to stay away from. So to find something that you could make that is as delicious, and if I gave you this dressing, you wouldn't even know that it didn't have the things that you're used to. So let's make this dressing, and I'll show you how fast it is. And as I've said to you, I like always having a dressing, and I have no dressings in the refrigerator right now. So probably later in the week, I'll also make a balsamic dressing of some sort. If you don't make a dressing, you literally can squeeze. Sometimes I just do tahini, and I just do orange juice and lemon juice, or add a little bit of garlic. I mean, dressings can be super simple. And just like we talked about cornbread, dressings have a similar kind of makeup, right? And the makeup of a dressing usually is some kind of oil, some kind of kick to it, some kind of spice, meaning like a kick, something that is like a mustard. It often has a sweetener, just like the cornbread has sometimes a honey or something sweet. Today we're going to use raisins, and we're going to use mustard, and we're going to use a piece of garlic. So I am going to, I have a NutriBullet here, which is something that if you're trying to build your kitchen and you don't have a lot of equipment and you don't want to spend a ton of money right away on a Vitamix, which is something I definitely recommend, but I certainly didn't have one for many, 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 many years because it was just cost prohibitive. This is called a NutriBullet, and it comes with several size. It comes with this size blender. Everything goes upside down. It has a blade here that is stationary, but you screw this in. And this is something I also do in the morning before I leave for work. Not only do I take my overnight oats with me, but I make a kale smoothie in this, and then I put a lid on this, and then I'm out the door with the smoothie and with the overnight oats, because that way I know I'm set for the whole morning and my morning snacks. So this recipe has what I've got here already in, and I'm going to actually put this blender back over here because it's just better to mix it over here. But what I have here is I'm starting with cashews, unsalted cashews, and we need a half a cup of unsalted cashews. And when you're using cashews, you want to soak them so that they break down. So if this is something you're making, give it a good 15 minutes to let the nuts soak in the water. We're using a half a cup of water and 2 ounces of raw cashews. And I have a few cashews here. I don't buy the whole ones. I try to buy the chopped pieces because they're less expensive, and you want the unsalted ones. I probably said that 3 times. Unsalted raw cashews. Now, if you're someone that wants to make this recipe and you are watching your calories and you don't want to have nuts in your diet, then a really good substitute for the nuts is some white beans. So either they're cooked white beans or a can of no salt beans that you've drained, and you would use about 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup to substitute the nuts. But we've only got 2 ounces of nuts here. So I'm going to add everything in here. So we need a lemon, and I still have some lemon juice that I squeezed, but let's go in order. So we have the water and the nuts, and I just have had those soaking. And then we need 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, and I just happen to have that here. So I have 1 here and 2 exactly. I love when it works out like that. Now, we talk a lot about citrus. I do talk a lot about citrus, whether it's a lemon, a lime, or an orange. This is a good tool, the citrus, as a way of bringing up flavor. And I usually take a zester and I peel this skin off, and I make zest, and I use it for a lot of different things. Like, for instance, if this was an orange and I zested it, I would put it right into the overnight oats because it would give it an amazing burst of orange flavor. And then the zest is actually a way of bringing up the flavor when you're not using salt. Now, we'll talk as we make other savory things. There are other ways. Primarily, it's the citrus. It's your fresh herbs and your spices that are going to bring up your flavor. And I know many of you, I used to feel I wasn't addicted to salt, but I liked salt even on my chocolate chip cookies. So for somebody, if I could do it, and I started losing my craving for salt, maybe on the 7th or 8th day of the Jumpstart program, my mouth was no longer craving it. And now if I go somewhere and I eat a bowl of soup, if it's a vegetable soup, I sometimes can't eat in a restaurant because it's so salty. So once you learn to make those substitutions for the salt, your mouth begins to change, but you must really give it that full 21 days because that's what it takes. We need 1 tablespoon of raisins, and that is going to be our sweetener here. And then we need 1 clove of garlic. I actually have something I talk about often, and I'm not sure. Oh, here's my garlic. This time I have local garlic, and it's quite beautiful. Sometimes I have garlic that is so tiny that like you would need 3 pieces to equal 1. And I tell you this often in my demos, that you have to kind of learn what a normal piece of garlic looks like, so that when you're dealing with something tiny, maybe you need 3, and it says 1 garlic, but you need 3 pieces. Here, this is 1 clove of garlic, but it's gigantic, so I just cut it in half, and we'll use that for another time. So the garlic is going in there, raisins are in there, and then it says we need 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. So Italian seasoning is really kind of a fun spice to have in your cabinet. They sell it, and it literally is Italian seasoning. And it has oregano in it, and it has marjoram and thyme and rosemary and basil and sage. Now, there was a time when I didn't even own Italian seasoning because I had those individual spices, and if I wanted something to be Italian, I would just grab the thyme, grab the basil, grab the oregano, grab the marjoram. But this is a nice thing to have for just convenience sake. So I actually said, you know what, I'm just going to buy it. And I seem to use it as quite often. So it says that we need 1 teaspoon. And whenever I use a dry herb like this, I know this is going to all get ground up, but I'm just going to rub it between my hands, and that kind of brings it alive. I'm going to keep this Italian spice out because I'll talk about it again when we're making our marinara. So this is this is done. It doesn't need anything else. It just says all we have to do is put it in the blender until it's smooth. Oh, and it does say that it needs some black pepper. So I'm going to give it some black pepper, fresh ground black pepper. Okay, and this is going to go on, and we're just going to zip it around for a very few minutes. the dressing. That's it. Doesn't make a lot. So if you wanted to double, if you found that you were eating it a lot, you might want to make 2 or 3 times the recipe amount. And then I love putting it into a jar. But before I do that, I always clean down the sides, right? And you can put it in any kind of tight, airtight container you want. Of course, things do get stuck here to the blade. I'm just going to get that cleaned off. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of a taste. Oh my God. It's always so delicious. I can never get over how delicious it is. Each and every time I make it, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And we're going to move the cutting board for a minute. And we're just going to bring out, well, maybe we need the cutting board, actually. I just realized. Sometimes I have to make room here. Oh, and you know what we didn't do? This is why I always read the recipe. We didn't put any mustard in it. So rather than putting it all back on the machine, I'm just going to mix the mustard. So it needs 2 tablespoons. That's a lot of mustard. And I always show you both 2 mustards. One is a regular Dijon mustard. This one is the fancy French one. And then there's this other brand that's called Westbury Natural. And that is a stone ground mustard, and it says no salt added. This is actually a little bit hard to find. You could either order it on, Amazon or wherever you order your food from. Often natural food grocers, if you're in New York City, which I know many of you are, but not all of you are, that you would buy it at the Health Nuts. They actually have it, and there's one on the Upper East Side, and there's one on the West Side. And I'm almost out of this. And for me, this is a hard mustard to find here where I live. So I'm going to end up having to order it. But I get a couple jars. And it is so stuck in the little jar here that this is when I actually pour the dressing sometimes into, like, I'm going to save this jar because the mustard is all stuck to the side. And I'm actually going to, when I make balsamic dressing, I'm going to actually make it in this container and shake it up really hard so that all this mustard that is stuck on the side, we need 1 more tablespoon. And it looks like I'm almost out of mustard of every kind. I don't know how that happened, but that is what's happened here. I go through mustard quite a bit because it is a zippy kind of tangy thing that I use in a lot of different things. So that is our 2 tablespoons. And that's why you want to always read the recipe again. I think it's very important to do that. Let's just move all this stuff away. And let me look at the cornbread. Oh, it's happening. It's good. It's happening. And just because it's mustard, I'm able to actually just mix it up. There's nothing to grind. And I'm just going to remove this knife. And what I'm going to do here is, normally you use romaine, right, for your salad, for Caesar dressing. You could use any kind of salad greens you want. Normally we would put Parmesan cheese on top. I don't know, I brought some out. I did provide a recipe because we're making a marinara. And in your recipe pack at the very end, this is another staple that I have in my refrigerator. It sits right next to the date paste. And this is nutritional yeast, which is a very cheesy flavor. And it's got a little bit of hemp seeds and nuts and some Italian spices. And this is our Parmesan cheese. We could use that as a sprinkle on the top, but I don't really, for some reason, don't seem to love it so much on my salad. I use it in other things, but let's just cut this up so that we have a small salad. I don't want to make too big of a salad. I do have a big plate. So here is that romaine, right? Really delicious romaine. And then I thought, you know what? Who cares what a normal Caesar salad has on it? But it definitely needs to have some onion. So I'm just cutting some onion. And this is a scallion. Can you use a shallot? Absolutely. Right? Can you use a red onion? Absolutely. I think every salad should have some kind of onion on it. And I'm just really chopping this so that it's fine. And I have a red pepper here. I thought that would be a nice addition. Oops, I have, I'm gonna Put that in my bowl over there. I have a big red pepper that I just sliced up into julienne slices like that. And I think I'm just going to cut this. I want kind of small diced pieces. So I'm just going to sprinkle that on top. You could put a tomato, you could put a carrot. It's really up to you what you put on your salad. Caesar salad normally has Parmesan cheese, and then it has croutons. So today I actually made some croutons, which I really haven't done in I don't know how many years. I have this Ezekiel bread, which is really good. It has made out of all sprouted grains, and I keep it in my freezer. And what I did was it's sliced bread, and I just made small cubes, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have some croutons? You know, and so what did I do to these so that they would brown without oil? I just put them in the oven at 400 degrees and toasted them. And I did put a little bit of the Italian spice. I just sprinkled it on these croutons. And would you believe I've been eating them all morning long because they're so yummy and they taste great. And it's going to give me my crunch in my salad. And it's going to make me so happy. And then I have a white radish here because I have that from my CSA box. And I think that would also be another nice thing to have on my Caesar salad. Again, not classic Caesar, but who cares, right? So we're going to put some white radish. And then this dressing is going to go on top. But usually I put it in a jar. Oh, here it is. I'll show you. I put it in this kind of jar here. And I just keep it in a jar for the whole week. It lasts a long time. It's quite good. And like I said, if you find yourself going through it quickly, just make double batch. I always have one or two kinds of dressings. So I don't have the need ever to make a double batch because I like having variety. So I never make a double batch. I'm always happy when it just runs out. So that is our dressing. So you know.
Carole, quick question, Carole.
Yes.
How long do you toast the bread for? How long does it take about?
I don't really know, Wendy. I think I toasted it. I almost forgot it. I was afraid I was going to forget it and I was going to end up with black bits because I was on the phone toasting it. I would say it's probably 20 minutes. 20 minutes at 400 degrees. And I think the spices on it are really yummy. I thought that I would have to put a little bean juice on the bread and then put the spices so the spices would stick. But somehow it's very flavorful. I haven't made these before. I just thought this morning, I thought, oh, I'm making Caesar salad. I should have croutons. And we just got finished, you and I, talking about how desirable it is to have crunch, right?
Yeah.
So I thought just a few croutons, and why not make it out of healthy bread instead of just white bread that's, not so good for us.
Right.
So that is our...
For those of you in the Jumpstart, Carole is talking about the Ezekiel bread brand. You can find it in most grocery stores, and it's a sprouted bread, and it is whole grain because we're all about the whole food.
I love their tortillas. This is the label.
Yeah.
This is what the label looks like. It's almost always in the freezer section. They have tortillas, they have English muffins, they have raisin bread, they have lots of different kinds of sesame bread. They have all sorts of kinds. They even make hamburger buns and hot dog buns. I mean, they are very, very delicious. It's all sprouted lentils, sprouted millet, sprouted barley, sesame seeds. It does have a little bit of salt, but believe it or not, it's the last ingredient in the paragraph of things here. And it's sodium, it says, is 5%, like so little bit of salt. So this is the label. And the only place that I've never seen it in the freezer is Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's somehow just keeps it with the rest of their bread, and they don't have it in the freezer. So we must move on. Were any other questions at all, Wendy?
There's a question about the Ezekiel, whether or not it needs to stay frozen. I tend to keep mine frozen, but what about you, Carol?
I have a friend that eats it all the time because he makes a sandwich every day, and so he just keeps it in the refrigerator. I would keep it because it has no preservatives. I would absolutely keep it cold. I like it in the freezer, and I will show you. I'll take a minute here to just show you. Why I keep it in the freezer is because I don't eat it often enough, and I love having it as backup bread for any occasion. And what is great about it is that it's already sliced, and you can literally pull it apart. Do you see? Pull it apart. That's 2 pieces of bread. I used 2 pieces of bread this morning for the croutons. No, I used 3 pieces actually. So I just pulled it apart, and I like that, and then it stays in the freezer totally frozen.
Great.
And I like it as backup emergency bread, just in case. And I actually make breadcrumbs when we make our lentil burgers or any kind of, bean burger. Sometimes you use ground oats, but sometimes you need breadcrumbs, and this is a perfect bread to make breadcrumbs from. Because if you go to the store and you look at the breadcrumbs and read what's in the breadcrumbs, it's really gross. If you could read 5 packages, even the panko, which is kind of a specialty gourmet breadcrumb, is got lots of oil and lots of junk in it. So that's the first and foremost thing, is you have to learn how to read the labels before you start bringing things home. And I'm telling you to do some investment and some time to do that. But it doesn't mean you're doing it forever. It just means you're doing it sometime. And then once you learn what the good products are, then you run through the store and you pick up your bread and you pick up the right can of tomatoes and the right can of beans, because you've already done your work. But at some point, you have to educate yourself on what you're buying. Okay? While we're back here and we're waiting, if any questions, I'm just going to look at the cornbread. It's almost done. It's almost done. Are we ready to move on? Because I want to move on, because we'll never get done.
We're ready.
Okay, great. So the next thing that we're going to do is just a sauce. And why do I like just having a sauce? I like having a sauce because then it's just like the dressing. It's just already there. So I don't have to do any work. I usually make some kind of stew or something like a soup on Sunday to carry me through the week. But I have been growing tomatoes in my yard, and I have 1 million of them, literally 1 million. And eventually I will be canning these tomatoes. These were just picked this morning, a nice basket, and I will just show you the beauty of the tomatoes. Do you see how many? This is just from today's picking. So what are we going to do to make a very quick marinara sauce? Some of you might say the quickest way to make marinara sauce is just to buy the jar. Well, good luck finding a jar that doesn't have, you can. I don't have a brand because I don't buy it very often, but it's almost always going to have some oil, and it's going to have quite a bit of salt. So I just encourage you to learn how to make a quick marinara, because why? You could have it on toast, you can make pizza, you can make pasta and have it on pasta. You could literally put some marinara. The other day I had a little bit left over with vegetables, and I baked a potato, and I literally put the potato in the middle of the plate, and I put the marinara sauce on it, and it was phenomenally delicious. And I did nothing. It felt like doing nothing. So I just want you to understand how to make something so very basic. So what I say in the recipe is you'll need to have the following things on hand. You need to have an onion, okay? And I had a gigantic onion. I literally only used 1/4 of an onion because I had a gigantic one. And I don't want to make too much sauce because I just came off making sauce last week, and I still have sauce. So I have chopped very finely an onion, okay, 1 white onion. It could be yellow, doesn't matter. And this is about 1/2 cup. you're gonna have to figure out the proportions that you like, but this is about a half a cup. Then we're going to need garlic, which I have here, and I had another piece that I saved, and it's right here. Now you could either mince this garlic with, just mince it fine, just like your onion, but I'm actually just going to slice it very, very thin right now. And I'm gonna just have whole pieces of garlic in my sauce. Why? Because I actually really like the garlic and I like seeing it. And we're gonna saute without any oil in the pan. Now that is called water sauteing or broth sauteing. And you say, how do you do that? Well, it's super simple. You either can take some kind of vegetable broth, which I almost always have in my refrigerator, but I have none today. So I'm just going to get a cup, and I had a cup here. I'll just use this jar here because it's right here. And I'm just gonna get some water, okay? Just some water, and I'm gonna have this on the side. And we're not going to flood these onions or garlic. We're just going to put a little bit of water in. And I just want to move everything here so everyone can see and make sure that people can see my cooking thing here. And I'm just going to move this in, okay? That's better. So we want to see if the pan is hot. So I always take a little water and I just put it in, and the water is sizzling. I hear it. And as well as I see it steaming, okay? There's no water in the pan, and I'm gonna put these onions right into the pan. Now, these onions, all onions have their own sugars, okay? Natural sugars, and they will start to release. And if you were to cook this, like maybe 20 minutes, you would definitely end up with brown onions. If that's something that you love to eat, brown onions, you could just cook them for a very few minutes. Now, I don't want these sticking to the pan, so I'm going to put just a little bit of water, okay? Just a little bit. I am not putting a ton. You can see the steam coming up, and I'm going to just make sure I get a spoon, and we're just going to start cooking these onions right in this little bit of water. Now, the broth is more flavorful, but I'm not so worried about flavor here because I'm going to put onions and garlic, and the thing that I almost always put in so I always have onions. I don't have big pieces. I told you that I cut them really small. The other thing that I very much love, and I thought I took it out and I did, is a little bit of chili flakes, okay? That's a classic thing to put in your sauce, as well as I love cooking spinach or broccoli with chili flakes because it gives it a little bit of a kick, right? And you want that kind of flavor. So at this point, I'm going to start to add these chili flakes. I'm going to add 2 or 3 pinches. Again, this is not an exacting recipe, so don't worry, because you're going to build it to your liking, right? And I know that I like the chili flakes, so I put in 3 pinches to a half a cup of onions. So this is just cooking, and I'm always listening for it to stick. And when I think it's gonna stick, I put a little bit more water in, just like that, just a tiny bit. And at this point, everything is sauteing, and I'm gonna actually put in our sliced garlic. Again, you could mince the garlic. I just thinly sliced it. I very much want to have pieces of garlic in my marinara. And already this is smelling heavenly, and I'm just going to show you what that's looking like, right? It's cooking away without any oil in it whatsoever. Okay, now I showed you that I have a ton of tomatoes, but if I were making this in the winter time and had no fresh tomatoes, and maybe even if I bought tomatoes, they would be not very flavorful, and I would wish that I had. That's why I'm going to can all the tomatoes from the garden. But there is a brand, Wendy has the link to it, that I particularly love. It's a no salt by Bio Nature. They're an organic These happen to be crushed tomatoes. I very much love the whole tomatoes. This is a 28-ounce can, and it's pretty easily found. In New York, I used to buy it at the Fairway, Whole Foods, Health Nuts. It's pretty common to find it. Again, it's nature. I always call it nature, but it's Natura, Natura. So Wendy can provide the link to that. It is definitely something. Now I can hear that this is getting stuck, so I'm just going to add a teeny bit of water. This is going to happen because I'm talking and not paying attention. So you do have to pay attention. Now, there are many ways to make the tomato sauce. Okay, this is the skillet way. Okay, I just want to tell you, sometimes I just cut all the tomatoes in half. I put some garlic and some herbs and even the onion in the 400-degree oven, and I just let it roast for like an hour till everything kind of gets all concentrated. And then I put it in the blender and I just blend it up. And you have a wonderful roasted tomato and onion. But I thought for convenience sake here, we would stick to the top of this skillet here, so that we don't have to turn the oven on for that. And we have our cornbread that I have to look at. Now, normally, I just take the tomato at this point, and I literally just cut it, okay? And I just start, and how much sauce am I making? I never quite know. You could estimate that maybe it's 2 tomatoes per person, okay? So this would go in here. Now, the way we used to make it in the restaurant, and often I'm lazy at home, and I don't do this, but I did this just to show you, is the proper way to deal with fresh tomatoes is to actually peel them. And how do you peel a tomato? You actually have to boil a pot of water, and then you put the tomato in the boiling water for like 1 to 2 minutes. And what happens is the skin just comes right off. And because what happens when you cook the tomato and you don't take the skin off, it actually ends up kind of curling the skin and kind of gets in the way of the texture once in a while. Okay, but when I'm making sauce like this, I often don't bother with this step. But I just wanted to show you. And of course, all of this tomato skin, I save this tomato skin, and it goes into my stock pot when I'm making with onions, and I just make sure that I save all the skin. So let's start to get all of this in, because it's starting to get very messy on my counter, and I actually don't like that. So we're just going to cut this all up. I have a bowl here with and this is all going to get cut up, and it looks delicious. Sometimes if you don't have flavorful tomatoes, you would want to add maybe a tablespoon of tomato paste. But these tomatoes are out of this world, and I know for a fact, just eating it like this, it's so yummy. I don't even know why you'd have to cook it, because it's just so yummy. So let's get this in the pot before the onions start to burn, right? And sometimes you have to add a little bit of water, right? And this is, as you can see, it's a messy endeavor. Again, I'm just going to take another peeled tomato, and you don't have to peel the tomatoes. It's only if you're a person that is a purist and you don't want to have the skins, but definitely don't throw out that. And I actually have a yellow tomato that I'm going to wash right here. And I'm going to put that in there too, actually, because it's going to be delicious. Now, does it matter how you cut it? It really doesn't. Okay, I'm just because you just want it to cook down. And the yellow tomato is going to make my, yellow tomatoes aren't so acidic. So it's going to make it a little bit of an otter color, but that's okay. And I don't want to make too much. I often get carried away and make too much sauce. And it's a super crazy thing. And you can put a lid if you want to try to cook it faster. And the other thing that I like doing at this very point is I take the basil. This is fresh basil, and I'm actually going to strip it. This is actually a dirty cutting board. Let me just get rid of all this juice. Okay, it's all going right into the pan to cook. And what is a great thing is this is all clustered basil. It doesn't have a big stem, but it's super wonderful that if you had picked all this basil and you pulled it off, literally like this, you pull, these leaves could go on the top of your pasta, but here is the stem. This is delicious just to go in, just like that. And then I have a little bit of fresh thyme. You can put that just in there, just like that. And I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I'm going to turn it up so that it actually boils. And so the way we're bringing up the flavor here is with the fresh basil, fresh thyme. I actually have a little bit of oregano here. That's another way of bringing up the flavor. You could easily use dried oregano. You could use your Italian seasoning. There are so many options here. Okay, I'm just showing you the options. I actually have a little box outside that just has fresh herbs. So, and we're gonna start to have our freezes here soon, I'm guessing. So I'm trying to, either use my fresh herbs, otherwise I'm gonna end up drying them all out and just having dried herbs. So this is the oregano that I'm chopping here, and I have the basil off to the side because I'm gonna save that for later. Okay, and let's just get this fully mixed. And you could put a lid on it if you want it to cook fast. You could, you don't have to. But this, and as it cooks, you might add a little bit of water to it. But that really is our marinara. I'm going to let it cook for a few minutes just while we look at the cornbread, because we must do that. Wendy, we're already over for a few minutes, but I can wrap it up in a very few minutes. I'm going to take our cornbread out, turn the oven off, stop, and I will show you how to take this out. But this is our cornbread here.
Wow, Carole, that looks great.
It's going to be delicious, but I have to let it cool, Wendy. So before I go taking it out, because if I take it out too early, it won't come out well. But I want to be able to show that. So that will be the last thing that we do. And I'm just going to chop this basil, and we're going to finish this very quickly, this marinara. And how are we going to finish it? At this point, I just brought out some mushrooms. I love to, once the sauce is done, I like to start putting some vegetables in there. You would put the sliced mushrooms in there now, if you'd like, so that they cook along with the sauce. I also took out some broccolini, which is very similar to regular broccoli, but this is broccolini. It kind of is a combination of, it looks like an asparagus stem with feathery top of the broccolini. This you can actually eat a lot of the stem, and I love it. And I'm going to put the stem, and I'm just going to put it here on the top for fastness. And I'm going to get rid of all these things. Here's some more juice. I'm going to move all of these things over here. Wendy, as we're wrapping up now, because I'm going to plate the spaghetti, I want to show you there are lots of kinds of pasta to try if you haven't, not the white semolina pasta, but there is lots of kinds of pasta. This brand I talk about a lot. It's called Pasta Joy. It's brown rice pasta. It is delicious in the sense it has true advertising, and it says that it's never mushy. I love that. Good texture, not mushy, al dente. This is yummy pasta that I have found. There is chickpea pasta. There is lentil or quinoa. I know Trader Joe's makes a very delicious pasta that I like, quinoa pasta. By the same tomato brand, they make a corn, quinoa, and lentil pasta that I very much like. So I cook the some fettuccine ahead of time. Now, you don't have to have pasta, and especially if you're trying to watch your weight, you don't want to have so much pasta. But I'm going to put some of this pasta. I'm not going to make a lot of it, but I'm going to actually put it in here right now because we're just going to serve this up. I cooked this several hours ago. I didn't have it soaking in anything. A little bit of it is stuck together, but it's going to break down in the sauce here eventually. And this is how I make myself a quick meal. This is like typical Carole cooking on a weeknight. How do I eat fast? How do I get my greens in? I've added my broccoli. And I always have some beans cooking. And today, I don't know where they are. Oh, here they are. I cook these big, gigantic beans. I mean, they're gigantic in the sense that they really are gigantic. And what's wrong with putting some beans in there to get some extra fiber? And I love putting the juice of the beans. That's the cooking water, what we call aquafaba. And I've just put a little bit of that in as this is cooking. And I'm going to have to be able to serve this in just a very few minutes. And I'm going to put my very fresh basil in it as well right now. And then if it needs, sometimes I put a little black pepper, which I just moved over here. We already have our chili flakes, but our black pepper is good. If your tomatoes are not extra sweet, now my tomatoes are so fresh, they taste like candy. Like I don't know what to do to get rid of the sugar. I want to put more chili flakes. I did take out 2 carrots. And if you felt your tomatoes didn't have any sweetness, you would just either put this carrot in whole or just chop it up and put in the carrot flavor would go into your sauce and give it a nice flavor. So I'm going to start plating things, Wendy, while you're like wrapping things up. And I want to show everyone the only thing that I want to do is clean the cutting board, and we'll try to take out the cornbread, even though it's sooner than soon.
Great. Carole, I'm just going to jump in with announcements, and then we'll come right back to you so that we can see each one of those dishes held up to the camera, which is always really fun when we can view everything. One thing for the jump starters in particular, I was going to mention, actually she's off screen just for a second, but notice how colorful everything is. So when you saw the countertop, it's just filled with color, and that's really one of the cooking in this manner, and it's also the health benefits. I'm sure you're learning to eat the rainbow, and you can see how much color is on the screen and in all these foods. So quick announcements, I mentioned them at the beginning. Plant Powered Metro has an event tomorrow night in Astoria, Queens. It's called The Taste of Health in the Plant Powered Garden. Now, for many of you, you will notice on the web, we're supposed to have RSVP'd by September 16th. But if you're interested in going, it's in Astoria. You can write to info@ppmny.org and see if there's still any room yet. But you're invited by our hosts, Enrica and Enrica Sacca and Anita Mancini, and they have a wonderful array of plant-based foods that they'll have there. It's also a fundraising event for our organization, so please do consider coming. Up next, actually on Wednesday is our Plant-Powered Book Club, September 21st, and then we have initiated a new series called Heart to Healthy Heart, plant-based conversations that can save your life. And this is an ongoing series with cardiologists. So please join us for that. All of these events you can register for on our Plant Powered Metro New York website under events. And then finally, a very special call out next weekend, the 24th and 25th, our partner and often a guest on this, on Plant Powered events, is Dr. Ron Weiss, who runs a farm, Ethos Farm, and he's hosting a very special event called Farm Days, and we'll have guests like the real pioneers and stalwarts of the plant-based movement, doctors like Dr. Furman and Dr. T. Colin Campbell, Dr. Clapper, an environmental specialist, Dr. Selish Rao, and Jean Bauer from the Farm Sanctuary. So it's a phenomenal weekend and a really beautiful farm. Dr. Weiss does regenerative farming, which really concentrates on the quality of the soil, which we know also makes a difference. So please join us. There's a 50% discount for people if you come through Plant Powered Metro New York. So please do join us on that. So a very warm thank you to our producer today and our co-host, Britt Vanderpool, and also to Alan Smithy for his earlier contributions. Our next demo with Chef Carole will be Sunday, October 23rd at 5. And all the links to everything I just mentioned is on our website. Carole can be reached at carole@thevegievanguard.com. She's also on Instagram. You can see amazing pictures of her cooking at the Veggie Vanguard. And then for any of you who would like, please consider a donation to Plant Powered Metro New York so we can continue doing our best work in communities and also keep providing these kinds of shows for free to all of you who are participating. So really thank you to all who are here. We're just at the 6:30 mark, but I want to send the camera back to Carole so you can see.
We just want to finish.
Yep.
We just want to finish. So, Wendy, this is what the sauce looks like in the pan, right?
Yeah.
And I probably would let it cook for a few minutes. And right now it needs to cook down and has a little bit of liquid in it. And I just want it to get a little bit thicker. And as I mentioned, you could put a little bit of tomato paste if you want it to be a little more strong. But my tomatoes are so fresh and delicious. I did plate the dish with the broccoli. It has the big gigantic beans. It has a little bit of pasta at the bottom. And that is going to be, that could have the Parmesan cheese if you want on top. And then lastly, I wanted to show you, I don't know if this is really going to work, so we might have a disaster, because you're supposed to let desserts cool or bread or anything before you take things out of the pan. But let's just give it a try. And I'm just literally going to flip it over. And like I said, it might be a little too early for it to come out, which it is. I can see that only half of it wants to come out, and I just broke a little bit of it. But it's okay. I don't mind breaking a little bit of it because I knew what I was doing was taking it out too early. But it's okay because I wanted to show that to you. And then what I do is I take another cutting board and I just flip it back so that its top is in the right place. And then I carefully, again, I usually wait till it's cool, and then I cut it into 12 squares, you know, so that you get even amounts. So I go 3, and then, well, I go 4. I cut it in half, right? I cut it in half, then I cut the half in half again, right? And then cut the half in half again. And then do the same thing in the opposite direction. But for now, I'm just going to show you, this is what the cornbread looks like, right? And I make this so much, and it's so delicious. It's my favorite thing in the world. And hot, too hot to eat, but really delicious. And then we have our Caesar salad with our Caesar dressing, and that's it.
It looks absolutely, absolutely wonderful. As usual, I think the audience must be like me. I think we all just want to come over for dinner. It looks really delicious. Thank you so, so much. I don't envy you the cleanup, but the meal looks fantastic. So thank you so much.
And thank you for hosting, Wendy and Britt. And I thank everyone always for just showing up, because I put a lot of energy into preparing things, and I'm always just happy that people show up. And so I hope that you all have learned some of the basics. If you already knew some of these basics, then it's good to have a refresher, right? One can learn things over and over again and change things up, and try some oatmeal without the nutmeg and the cinnamon. I promise you the cardamom will send you over the moon and back. So
thank you, Carole. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Those on the Jumpstart, good luck. Just go for it. Give it your best and just go for it. I promise you it will be worth it. Really, good luck to all of you and those watching. Thank you so much for being here and hope you enjoyed the show. Good luck cooking. Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.